They say that the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who know exactly where to twist the knife. They know your soft spots, they know your history, and most importantly, they know how to make you believe their lies, even when the truth is staring you right in the face. My name is Sarah, and for 10 years, I thought I was living the perfect life. I had the house with the white fence, a career I loved, and a husband, Mark, who was the envy of every woman in town. He was charming, successful, and always knew the right thing to say. But as I stand here today, looking at the empty walls of what used to be our home, I realize that every "I love you" was a calculated move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. Mark didn't just betray me. He didn't just find someone else. He tried to erase me. He tried to take my dignity, my savings, and my sanity. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he had left me with nothing but tears and a broken heart. But Mark made one fatal mistake. He forgot who I was before I met him. He forgot that you can only push a person so far before they stop crying and start planning. He thought he won. He really did. He was so confident in his victory that he didn't see the storm coming until it had already leveled his entire world. This isn't just a story about a cheating husband. This is a story about what happens when you take everything from a woman who has nothing left to lose. By the time I was done, Mark didn't just lose his money. He lost his reputation, his future, and the very ground he stood on. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to the day I realized my life was a lie.
If you saw us 3 years ago, you would have been jealous. That's the truth. Mark was a rising star at a top architectural firm. I was a senior editor for a lifestyle magazine. We were the it couple. We hosted the best dinner parties. We went on the most beautiful vacations. I remember one night in particular. It was our 8th anniversary. We were sitting on a balcony in Italy, the smell of jasmine in the air, the Mediterranean Sea sparkling under the moonlight. Mark took my hand, looked me deep in the eyes and said, "Sarah, I don't know where I'd be without you. You're my rock. Everything I build for us." I believed him. Why wouldn't I?
But looking back now, the signs were there. They're always there, aren't they? It's just that love acts like a blindfold. You see the late nights at the office as ambition. You see the hidden phone as work privacy. You see the sudden coldness in his eyes as stress. I remember the first time I felt that pit in my stomach. It was a Tuesday. Mark had come home late, again. He didn't even look at me when he walked through the door. He went straight to the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just a short, sharp vibration. I shouldn't have looked. I told myself I was being paranoid. But something inside me, that instinct we all try to ignore, screamed at me to pick it up. It was a notification from a banking app. A withdrawal of $5,000. From our joint savings account. The account we were supposed to use for our future children's college fund. When Mark came out of the shower, I asked him about it. I tried to stay calm. "Oh, that," he said, barely glancing at me as he dried his hair. "It's an investment, Sarah. A friend of mine started a tech firm. It's a sure thing. I told you about it, remember? You probably just forgot because you've been so busy with work." He said it with such gaslighting perfection. He made me feel like the forgetful one. The crazy one. He kissed my forehead and told me to go to sleep. And for a while I did. I let the lie settle. I let him convince me that my intuition was just anxiety. But the withdrawals didn't stop. And neither did the late nights. The next few months were a slow descent into a nightmare. Mark became a ghost in our own home. He was there, but he wasn't there. He was always on his phone, always smiling at a screen, but never at me. The intimacy was the first thing to go. Then the conversation. Then the basic respect. I started noticing small things. A receipt for a jewelry store in his pocket. I never received any jewelry. A scent of perfume on his jacket that wasn't mine. He started criticizing me too. My clothes, my cooking, the way I laughed. It was as if he was trying to justify his betrayal by making me the villain in his head. "You're so clingy lately, Sarah," he'd say when I asked why he was coming home at 2 a.m. "Why are you checking the bank statements? Don't you trust me?" Trust? That's the weapon they use against you. They make you feel guilty for doubting them, even when they're giving you every reason to. One afternoon, I decided I couldn't live in the dark anymore. Mark had left for a business weekend in Chicago. At least, that's what he told me. But I had checked the airline apps. There were no flights booked in his name. I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator, a man named Elias. He was expensive, but I needed to know. I needed to see the truth, even if I knew it would destroy me. 3 days later, Elias called me. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat and professional. "You might want to sit down. I'm sending you a link to a private folder. It contains photos and a location." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. I clicked the link. There he was. My husband. My rock. He wasn't in Chicago. He was 3 towns over, in a luxury rental house. And he wasn't alone. In the photos, he was holding a woman I recognized instantly. It was Chloe, my younger sister's best friend. Someone we had invited into our home. Someone I had mentored. But it wasn't just the cheating. As I scrolled through the folder, I saw photos of them at a real estate office. They were looking at brochures for a house in another state. Then I saw a photo of a legal document Mark was holding. I zoomed in. It was a power of attorney. He had forged my signature. He wasn't just planning a new life with another woman. He was systematically draining our assets, transferring my inheritance into accounts I couldn't touch, and preparing to leave me with nothing but debt and a broken name. He was planning to vanish, and he was going to make sure I couldn't follow him because I'd be too busy fighting off the banks. That was the moment the sadness died. In its place, something cold and sharp took root. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat in that dark room for 4 hours, staring at the screen. Mark thought he was the architect, but he had no idea that I was about to redesign his entire future. Mark came home on Monday morning, acting like he'd just had a grueling business trip. He even brought me a souvenir from Chicago, a cheap airport keychain. He stood in the kitchen making coffee, telling me about the meetings he'd had. I watched him. It was like watching a movie of a person I used to know. I realized then that I wasn't looking at my husband. I was looking at a predator who was waiting for the right moment to go for the throat. "Is everything okay, Sarah?" he asked, flashing that smile that used to make my heart melt. "You're very quiet." "I'm just tired, Mark," I said. "I've been thinking about our future. About that investment you mentioned." He didn't even flinch. "Oh, it's going great. We're going to be very comfortable soon, I promise." "Good," I replied. "Because I've decided to move some of my own funds around to help out. I want to be a part of this." I saw the greed flash in his eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. He thought he was getting an extra payday. He thought I was handing him the final pieces of the puzzle. "That's my girl," he said, hugging me. The touch made my skin crawl. But I leaned into it. I needed him to believe I was still his naive wife. I needed him to feel safe. Because when a person feels safe, they get sloppy. Over the next week, I played the part. I was the doting wife. I signed the papers he brought home. Except I didn't really sign them. I had a friend who was an expert in high-end document reproduction. I signed copies with ink that would disappear in 48 hours, or I signed versions that had hidden clauses he was too arrogant to read. While he was busy planning his getaway with Chloe, I was meeting with Elias and a forensic accountant. We found out that Mark hadn't just stolen from me. He had been borrowing from his firm's escrow accounts to fund his luxury lifestyle and his secret house with Chloe. He was planning to use my inheritance to replace the stolen money before the firm's annual audit. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief. And he was using me to cover his crimes. If I had just called the police then, he might have gone to jail for a few years. But that wasn't enough. Not for what he did to my heart. Not for what he was doing with my sister's friend. I wanted him to feel the exact moment the ground disappeared from under his feet. I wanted him to be standing at the peak of his new life, right as the mountain turned into a cliff. While Mark was picking out curtains for his secret house with Chloe, I was doing some decorating of my own. I knew the audit at his architectural firm was coming up in 3 weeks. Mark's plan was simple. Use my inheritance money to fill the hole he'd dug in the company's accounts, quit his job, and vanish. But I had already moved that money. Using the forensic accountant's help, I diverted my inheritance into a private trust he couldn't see. Then I did something even bolder. I began leaking information. I sent an anonymous tip to the senior partners at his firm, not about the cheating, but about accounting irregularities. I knew they wouldn't act immediately. They'd wait for the audit. I needed them to catch him red-handed, right when he thought he was safe. Meanwhile, I played the clueless wife to perfection. One night, I sat him down and handed him a glass of wine. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling slightly, half from acting, half from the sheer adrenaline of the lie. "I've signed the final transfer for the investment. The funds should hit your account by Friday." He beamed. He actually kissed me. "You've made the best decision of our lives, Sarah. We're going to be so happy." He wasn't talking about us. He was talking about the life he had planned with Chloe. He spent that night on his work computer, likely booking a one-way flight. I spent that night in the guest room, watching the GPS tracker I'd placed on his car. He went to Chloe's that night. I watched the little red dot on my screen stop at her apartment. I didn't cry. I just took a sip of tea and checked the time. The trap was set. Every year, Mark's firm held a founders gala. It was a black tie event, full of the city's elite. Mark had told me he didn't want to go this year, claiming he was too stressed. "Nonsense," I told him. "You've worked so hard. You deserve a night of recognition." What he actually wanted was to be at Chloe's packing bags. But he couldn't say no without looking suspicious. The night of the gala, I wore a dress that cost more than his car, paid for by the investment account he thought he controlled. I looked radiant. He looked nervous. His eyes kept darting to his phone. He was waiting for the notification that the money had arrived. It never did. Halfway through the dinner, I stood up. I tapped my glass with a spoon. The room went silent. Mark looked at me, his face turning pale. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, smiling at the crowd. "To my husband, Mark. A man who taught me everything I know about building things. He spends so much time thinking about foundations, about what's hidden beneath the surface." Mark tried to pull me down. "Sarah, that's enough, you're embarrassing me." "Oh, I'm just getting started," I whispered, loud enough for the table to hear. I signaled to the waiter. But instead of more champagne, the waiters began handing out envelopes to the senior partners at the head table. Inside weren't party favors. They were copies of the bank transfers Mark had made from the firm's escrow accounts, and photos of him and Chloe at the real estate office. The silence in that room was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The CEO of the firm, a man who had mentored Mark for years, opened the envelope. His face went from confusion to pure, cold fury. He looked at Mark, then back at the papers. "Mark," the CEO said, his voice like ice. "My office. Monday morning. Don't bother bringing your key card." Mark scrambled. "Sir, I can explain. Sarah is she's going through a mental break. I'm not the one whose signature is on these embezzled checks, Mark," I said calmly. He turned to me, his face contorted with a rage he could no longer hide. "You think you're so smart? You just ruined our lives. That money is gone, Mark," I interrupted. "I moved it. All of it. The inheritance, the joint savings, even the investment you thought you were making. It's in a trust you'll never touch." He reached for his phone, likely to call Chloe. "Don't bother," I said. "I sent her the photos of you signing the prenuptial agreement I had you sign last week. You know, the one where you admitted you were only with her for the money? She's already blocked your number. And she's already moved out of that rental house." The look on his face, it wasn't just shock. It was the look of a man who realized he was standing on air. Mark tried to run. He actually tried to leave the gala and get to his car. But when he got to the valet, he found out his car had been repossessed an hour earlier. I had stopped the payments weeks ago. He was standing on the sidewalk, in a $3,000 tuxedo, with no car, no job, and no home. The next morning, the police were waiting for him. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just about the cheating, it was about the fraud. He had forged my name on federal documents. That's not just a divorce issue, that's a prison issue. I watched from across the street as they led him out of his office in handcuffs. He looked small. He didn't look like the Rock I had married. He looked like a frightened little boy who had been caught with his hand in the jar. He called me from the station. One phone call. "Sarah, please," he sobbed. "I'll give you everything. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you authorized the transfers." "I did give you everything, Mark," I said. "I gave you 10 years of my life. I gave you my trust. I gave you my heart. And you threw it all away for a woman who didn't even stay for the fallout. Goodbye, Mark. Enjoy the silence." A month later, the divorce was finalized. Because of the documents he'd signed, the ones he hadn't bothered to read properly, he walked away with nothing. No alimony, no assets, nothing but his legal fees. I went back to our house one last time. It was empty now. The furniture was gone, the perfect life was packed into boxes. I sat on the floor of the living room where we had our first anniversary dinner. I thought I would feel happy. I thought I would feel a rush of victory. But all I felt was peace. Revenge doesn't make the pain go away. It doesn't bring back the years you lost. But what it does do is give you back your power. It reminds you that you aren't a victim of someone else's story. You are the author of your own. Mark is currently serving his time. Chloe disappeared to another state, her reputation in this town ruined. And me? I'm starting over. If you're listening to this and you're going through a betrayal, I want you to remember one thing. The person who hurt you wants you to stay angry. They want you to stay broken. Because as long as you're broken, they still have control over you. Don't give them that satisfaction. Don't scream. Don't beg. Don't send angry texts. Instead, get quiet. Get organized. And remember that the best revenge isn't just taking everything they have. It's becoming the person they never thought you could be without them. Mark thought he left me with nothing. He was wrong. He left me with the one thing I needed most, the truth. And the truth will set you free. But first, it will make you stronger than you ever imagined. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and survival. Until next time, stay strong.